Hello, HDExaminers. This is Jeff Morrow with Sierra Analytics. It's been a while since our last video, but that's because we've been hard at work building HDExaminer version 3, and this video will tell you all about the new features in that version. So let's dive right in. So the first thing you might notice is that this HDExaminer window looks a little bit different than the one in previous videos. That's because one of the features in HDExaminer 3.0 is high DPI monitor support. I happen to be running this and recording this video on a high DPI monitor, and so the resolution of various things in the user interface are smoother and cleaner. So if you're running on a high DPI monitor yourself, you can now use HDExaminer without all the weird problems of fonts that are the wrong size or things like that. The second big new feature in HDExaminer 3 is that we've pretty massively rewritten the calculation engine that finds isotope clusters and calculates their deuteration levels. For example, there are now various checks to ensure that the different results within a single peptide make sense relative to each other and not just each result being calculated in a vacuum. As a result of this, the feedback we're getting so far is that users have to spend significantly less time doing manual overrides on their data, which is always a good thing. The third new feature in HDExaminer 3 is that you can now import multiple protein sequences into a project instead of just one. So here's an example. This is a FASTA file containing 2 protein sequences instead of just one. If I import that file into HDExaminer, it simply brings in both protein sequences, the heavy chain and the light chain. So you can either bring in a FASTA file that has multiple sequences in it, or you can actually import FASTA files one at a time and just add them. So for example, if I take this project that already has the 2 sequences in it, and I decide that I want to add a third sequence to it, I can simply drag another FASTA file onto the window, and it will ask me whether I want to create a new project with the file I'm dragging on, or add the new file to this project. So I'm going to add it. And now the new protein sequence that I just added is also in the project. So you'll notice that each of these starts numbering from 1 as you'd expect, but you can change that. So for example, I can go to the residue offsets, and if this third sequence I want to actually start numbering from 20, I can do that. I can refresh the drawing here, and now we're starting from 1 and from 1 and from 20 on the third one, like I asked it to. So you can also change the names of your proteins. So under rename, say I want to just simplify this to heavy and light, I can do that, and it just updates there. And if I want to, say I accidentally imported the wrong sequence down here at the bottom, I can just right click and say remove this protein from the project. It confirms that I actually want to do that, and it removes it. So yeah, you can do multiple protein sequences. Now, by default, the analysis view does not show this protein column. It just shows start and end, but you can fix that pretty easily by going to Tools, Options, Deuteration Table, and toggle this protein name. So if you only have one protein sequence in your project, you may want to leave this this column out of the table, because the entry in that column will be the same for every single result because you only have one protein. But if you're using multiple proteins, this becomes critical to actually turn on so that you can see which peptide and which result corresponds to which of your proteins. Next up is bimodal distributions. As you probably already know, it's possible for a peptide to have 2 different deuteration distributions within your sample. HDExaminer can now fully calculate this and show you the results. So here's an example. And if we zoom in really closely, we'll see what it's actually doing. Now, if you've used HDExaminer before, you know that the red trace corresponds to the actual mass spec data, and the blue trace corresponds to the theoretical isotope cluster. But in the case of a bimodal distribution, the blue trace is actually the sum of two other distributions, in this case indicated in yellow and green. So if we back way up, we'll notice that the left distribution is the yellow one, the right distribution is the green one, and then when we zoom back in, their sum is the blue trace, which, as we can see, is matching the red trace, the actual data, very well. Now, there's enough to cover here under bimodal distributions that we've actually made a completely separate video for it on our YouTube channel. So head there to check it out. If you're watching this video on YouTube right now, there's a link to the other video in the comments below. So check out that video and learn more about how HDExaminer now handles bimodal distributions. The last feature I'd like to talk about is the new Multistate Heat Map. Normally here in the protein view, when you select a protein state, you see all of your time points at that protein state. And if you select two states, you see all of the time points and the difference between the two states that you selected. Well, what if instead you have a lot of protein states, and what you want to do is look at the states, compare the states to each other rather than the time points? Well, that's what the multi-state heat map is for. So to access it, you either select 3 or more protein states, or you just select this top level and it selects them all for you. Now what you're looking at in the heat map is, instead of viewing all of your time points at the selected protein state, you're viewing all of your protein states at the selected time point. So here's 30 seconds, 240, etc. In addition, you can tell this view to compare each protein state to the control state. So if I select that, you'll notice that the wild type state went away because that's the control state, and there isn't any point comparing a state to itself. But both of these are now a difference heat map between that state and the control state, which in this case is the wild type. So this top line is the differences between mutant and wild type, and you can see down here there's definitely some difference. And the bottom row is the difference between spiked and wild type, and it looks like there's no difference for that one. And again, we can select separate time points and so forth. In addition to that, you may export this to, you may export the data, you can export the image, you can export to PyMol or Chimera just like you could with any other heat map. So it works completely the same, except now instead of just viewing all of your time points at a single protein state, you can view all of your protein states at a single time point. So to summarize the new features in HDExaminer 3.0, we have high DPI monitor support. We have significant algorithm improvements that make for less time spent manually curating your data. Projects now allow multiple protein sequences rather than just one. The software now handles bimodal distributions. And again, check out our other video for more information on that feature. And finally, we have the multi-state heat map. As usual, a 30-day trial version of HDExaminer is available to anyone who wants to try it. If you have any questions or issues, please contact us at support@hdexaminer.com. This is Jeff Morrow with Sierra Analytics signing off and saying thanks for watching.